Hello, and welcome back to LA. I've been traveling a lot recently. I've been in the Netherlands, I was in Ireland, and the UK, and Ohio as well, actually. And now I'm back for a week, back home, and then I'm literally here for 6 days, and then I fly off to Australia and New Zealand. I think it's the middle of the night there, so I doubt any of you are listening from that part of the world, but if you are, I'm doing some events there and hope I can kind of meet you and hang out. One of the reasons why I was in Ireland is that I was preparing for my Wake Festival. Every year I do a little festival with 50 people from all over the world, and they come to Belfast, Northern Ireland, and we spend 4 days, really 5 because there's like a pre-event drinks, hanging out, conspiring together. There's live music, there's art, pub crawls, lots of reflections on theology. And I was just kind of doing a little bit of work on that while I was home, as well as seeing family and friends. I hope some of you will end up in Ireland at some point. I know some of you have. Some people are saying hi. There's Stephen from Copenhagen. Hey, how's it going? There's Phil and Ryan in Ohio. Very cool. Ryan, were you there for the Lakeside Chautauqua? I can't even say the word. Chautauqua. There you go. I remember it because I used the Seamus for sha. I remember that, and ta for talk. Chautauqua. So I remember that. Anyway. Today I wanted to talk a little bit about the technology of theology. And actually I realized that when I was about to come on that I've got lots that I want to say about that. We're only going to be able to like skim the surface. So I might do like 3 parts, maybe 4 parts on this topic, and if I can, I'll do them all in a row, like do one tomorrow, one the day after. I should really have a schedule for this, but I don't because I'm not a very scheduled kind of person. But yeah, so the technology of theology, and the word we give to that is liturgy. Liturgy is the technology of theology. Now, most disciplines have this distinction between theory and technology. For example, you have, in psychoanalysis, you have the theory, which is an exploration of drives, unconscious desire, and the unconscious itself. So you've got theories of the subject, and then you have the engaged in transference and projection and whatever. In biology, you have people who are just exploring the body, exploring the biological system, and then you have the technologies that come from that. You have surgeries, you have veterinary clinics or whatever, or take chemistry. You have people who are interested in the chemical composition of life, and then you have the technology which is seen in medicines. This goes across the board. Even in mathematics, you have people who are just interested purely in the theory of math, and then you have those who apply it to create bridges, buildings and planes. So theology is similar in the sense of it has a certain theoretical side to it, and it has a practical side to it. And these are deeply, deeply important. In my own work in radical theology, the theoretical side is called pyrotheology, and the technological side is called transformance art. And actually a lot of new people have been following my work recently. I think it's because I've been doing more podcasts with people like Rob Bell and Pete Holmes. So some of you have been following my work for a long time and you know a fair amount of the theory, but some of you are quite new to it. But hopefully this will still kind of make some sort of sense. So the theory is pyrotheology, the technology is transformance art. So the whole point is, once a week, twice a week, 3 times a week, in traditional churches, for example, people come together and they do an activity. And the activity is, in a sense, designed to form us and reform us. hopefully transform us as individuals and as participants in wider society. In the same way that in psychoanalysis you might go once, twice, or 3 times a week, yeah, Christianity has built into it this, repetition, this thing that you do, So I want to talk about what I think liturgy at its best is about in the tradition of radical theology. And as I say, I'm going to do 3 or 4 Facebook Lives about this. So we'll start with a very simple idea, which I say it's a simple idea, and now I'm hesitating as to how to say it. If you talk to people within the church, often you'll find within some churches people say, well, we embrace questioning, we embrace unknowing, uncertainty, right? Pretty much everybody does, wherever you go, even conservative churches, liberal churches, Orthodox, there's a certain place for mystery, for not having all the answers, for acknowledging that we are human, all too human. It can be called epistemic humility. It's just this idea that we don't know everything. But depending on where you go, the amount that you can question is either a little or a lot. You might go somewhere and they say, well, yeah, you can question certain readings of the Bible or certain understandings of the world. But, this is the stuff that you need if you're going to call yourself a Christian, or if you're going to call yourself a Muslim or a Buddhist or whatever it is. This is the kind of stuff that you need to believe. So some people go, there's a little bit of questioning, and then there's a big bunch of stuff that you have to have. Some places go, actually, you know what? There's a whole pile of stuff you can question, and there's only a little bit that you have to kind of believe. So it might be 10% or it might be 90%. But all of these communities agree that there's something that you have to hold on to, because otherwise you would fall into complete relativism. Everything, it would be like you wouldn't believe anything. How would you know anything? Why would you go out and try and help the poor? Why would you get out of bed in the morning? What makes helping your neighbor any better than just playing computer games all day, right? So that all makes sense. It sounds sounds plausible. But there's a different way to think of it. And Paul Tillich draws this out, where he says, what if we have to embrace both absolute relativism, complete relativism? There's nothing that you can believe without questioning, doubting, rethinking, right? And at the same time, there is something that is absolutely indubitable, a rock that is so firm that you just can't really do anything about it without being inauthentic to yourself and to the world. And what he means by this is he says, well, the thing that is the rock that you cannot deny without denying something fundamental about yourself and your place in the world is the absolute subjectivity of the other. That the other is not an object, that the other is a subject. Now, Sartre says this very well when he says hell is other people. What he means by that is kind of this idea that I feel like I'm the center of my universe. I am a subject and I'm surveying everything around me. I am the Lord and Master of all. But then I'm sitting in a park looking at everything, and someone turns and they look at me. I see their eyes, they gaze at me, and I am dethroned. I am made into an object for another, right? So they're looking at me. So Sartre has lots of good examples of this, like spying through a keyhole, and then the people you're spying on turn around and look at you, and they see your eye through the keyhole, and suddenly you're like, oh, freaked out. This is, in a sense, a confrontation with the other as a subject. At first, you're looking at them as objects, getting this pleasure from seeing them do something. But then when they look at you, you experience briefly their subjectivity. And so it's kind of hellish. It's like, oh my goodness, I'm not the Lord of everything. And Sartre says we try to avoid this, either with sadism, and sadism is where we reduce others to an object, or masochism, where we reduce ourselves to an object. But these are different ways of avoiding subjectivity. But for Tillich, you can't do that. Every subject is an absolute other that makes an infinite demand on us. When we go out into the world, there is a sense in which other individuals cry out to us that they are subjects that cannot be reduced to mere objects for our use. Emmanuel Levinas says this beautifully when he writes, "The face of the other cries, 'Do not murder me.' The face of the other cries, 'Do not murder me.'" So that's the kind of the absolute. And the reason why for Tillich that's an absolute is he says, like, if you deny the subjectivity of the other, you are doing something that's inauthentic. You are doing something that is kind of like destructive to you and to the other person, to the world. It's denying something fundamental, that you are not the center of the universe. But then he says, what you do with that, you have to take responsibility for, right? You cannot put that responsibility on someone else, some tradition, some authority, some tarot cards or fortune teller or prophecy or anything like that. And we all want to. And this is why Sartre used the term condemned to freedom. He says, it's not we're liberated in freedom. He says, in a sense, there's a condemnation to freedom, which is that when we experience our own responsibility in the world, it's terrifying. We are responsible for what we do, for what we don't do, and for trying to avoid both of these entirely. We're responsible for everything, including our irresponsibility. Now, by that he doesn't mean, this is not the freedom determinism debate, which we could talk about elsewhere. This is about taking responsibility for one's life and actions. It's a centering activity where you take responsibility. I think I might have talked about this elsewhere, but Sartre has a beautiful example where this young guy comes to him and says, my mother is elderly and I feel like I should look after her. But also, it's the First World War. France is under attack. I feel like I need to join, the army and fight against the Germans. And he's looking to Sartre to give him an answer of what to do, whether he plays a very big part of something small or a very small part of something big. And, Sartre uses this as a way of going, well, I think you're scared of taking responsibility for acting, that there is nothing I could say which will, take away your responsibility to decide what you do and to take responsibility for the consequences of that decision. And whether someone considers themselves religious or not, we all fear this. I mean, again, I live in LA. It's supposedly, a very secular place, but on every other street corner, there's a fortune teller. And a lot of the people who I know who go to fortune tellers don't really believe in it. They don't really, they're not kind of convinced there's some sort of person out there who can see the future. But a lot of people are still compelled to go because they don't know whether to break up with someone or stay going out with someone. And in one sense, we want someone else to tell us what to do so that we can blame them and not take responsibility for ourselves. Now, in relation to the technology of theology, radical theology, in terms of power theology, is trying to say we need to sensitize ourselves to the absolute subjectivity of the other, especially those who have no subjectivity symbolically in our society. So this is who are those who are given no symbolic value, who are not seen as subjects, who are not seen at all. So how do we sensitize us to them? And then also taking full responsibility for what we do in light of that demand. Not going that, this simple answer, that's how we do it because God told me, or the fortune teller told me, or the stars told me. But going, you know what, I don't quite know what I have to do, but I have to do something, and I have to take responsibility for that. So within the church, I argue that the spaces like Icon, the community I was part of, was an attempt to use poetry and art and music, comedy, the sermon, in order to sensitize us to the infinite subjectivity of the other and how they make a demand on us. And at the same time, deconstructing any simple and easy answers. Not so that people no longer knew what to do, but really to say you have to do something. So for example, we call this suspended space. So it was a performative act. You go, there's neither Jew nor Gentile, slave nor free, male nor female, Republican nor Democrat, for 1 hour in this space. Now, it wasn't true because there's always, Republicans, Democrats, male, female, white, black, pacifist, whatever. There's lots of identities that we have, and you can't strip them off. But there's a certain sense in which when you enter into what's called the epike, you try to see the subject beyond all of their Republican or Democrat, Catholic or Protestant, whatever identities. Not that you ignore them and you say they're not there, but you see them as a subject, as a subject with infinite value. And then what happens is when you leave the liturgical space, you take up your identities again. A sense of, if you're a Republican or a Democrat, and you fight. But now you don't fight as enemies because you've encountered each other in that space where you've seen the person as a subject. And so even if you disagree with them and disagree with them vehemently and fight them vehemently, and that's very, very important, that we engage in passionate discussions, they are based around a shared belief in the absolute value of the other and the need to respond to that in some sort of way. So this is one of the rules, I think, of liturgical space. And one of the ways we did this in ICON is we had the group called the Evangelism Project, and many of you know about this, so I'll be very quick, but we went to be evangelized by other groups, other communities. We went to the Islamic Society, the Jewish community, the Humanist Society, and we asked them to talk about what they believe and who they are. And we encountered them as subjects, as individuals. But the evangelism didn't happen then. The evangelism happened when we said to them, what do we look like to you? What is it like to be a Muslim in Belfast? What does the Christian community look like from your perspective? And then you see yourself through the other's eyes, and you see things maybe that you don't want to see, and you're evangelized. You're brought deeper into your tradition and sensitized. So the Evangelism Project was an attempt to see the other as a subject that makes a demand on us, and at the same time then saying, so what are we going to do about it, without having some sort of simplistic answer. A question I often get that's related to this is, people will often say to me, well, how should I bring up my kids? Should I bring them up in Christianity and, give them the stories and do the Sunday school stuff, and they hear all the Bible questions, and then when they're older, they'll deconstruct it, they'll question it, they'll find their own space. Do I do that or do I not? And one of the ideas behind this is that Christianity is this belief system. It's a set of stories and ideas and principles and morals, right? So should I teach my child that? Because sometimes if you teach it, then, you have to deconstruct it and it becomes its own problem. What do you do? But if you think of Christianity and the stories in the Bible as very often about questioning who we think is pure and impure, who we think is inside and outside, and they're about cultivating a sensitivity in us to the outsider, to those who are not given a voice, to those who are seen as mere objects to use and cast aside. And we see that, like the story of the Good Samaritan, it's questioning all of the things that people took for granted about who was good and who was bad, who was just some person to cast aside and who was worth something. And it problematizes that. Or the tax collector and the Pharisee, which at the time was again questioning our ideas of who is a subject, who is valuable, and who is not. If you think of Christianity as that, then in a sense, the answer, I think, is to simply say, well, we want to bring up our children and in a way that cultivates a sensitivity to the other and to our demand, the demand that is made upon us by the other. And so you can use the Christian tradition or any other tradition, whatever, but to do that. So when you're taking some of these stories, the idea is not like teaching them the story. It's that what is going on within the story, what is happening. And, in light of the subject I'm looking at today, so many of these parables and so many of these stories are designed to really cultivate a love of our neighbour and cultivate a sensitivity to the call of that neighbour on our being. And so the liturgical space is where for 1 hour of our week we encounter the subject. And that might be bringing someone in who is seen as an outsider and letting them speak, or having music that draws out some of the political issues that we're dealing with in our various cultures. Having prayers that draw out our responsibility to the other, and sometimes our lack of care for the other. And so this is part of what you do. And why bother doing this once a week or twice a week? Just because otherwise we'll probably become desensitized. Over time, we walk around, we're very prone to treat people as objects. We're very prone to give in to that part of ourselves that wants to simplify, demonize, put all of the badness on somebody else, and kind of like, see ourselves as pure. Or we might want to just, check out of society and live a very insular and depressed life. But if we go to a space regularly that tries to draw us out of that into a more three-dimensional type of life, a life in which we hear the call of the other, which you can think of as the call of the divine, the call of the other on us, this is beneficial not just for us as individuals or for us in our families or for us in our relationships, but also for us in our wider society. We can be a force for good. So, okay, that's the first thing I want to cover. Sorry, the bin men are outside, so there's a little bit of noise. I'll have a look over, see if you've got any questions or thoughts or comments on any of that. And then tomorrow, I think I want to look at rituals that help us run from our pain and suffering unknowing, and rituals that help us enter into those things. And I'm obviously an advocate of the latter. Okay, let's see. Lots of people from all over the world. Oh, someone likes the jacket. You like it? That's good. It's my. I always wearing jackets, but LA is too hot, so this is like the lightest jacket I have. Sounds like Buber, I and thou, says Zach. Yeah, there's definitely connections with Martin Buber, the German, I think he was German Jewish mystic. Let's see. Phil says, is part of it also trying to see ourselves as someone else's other and or their object? Is part of it also trying to see ourselves as someone else's other? Yes, if I hear you correctly, one of the reasons why we do the Evangelism Project, and this is, by the way, if you do the Evangelism Project once, it's just going to be an interesting day, but if you do this once a month, it begins to be a transformative experience, transforms who you are and hopefully cultivates a sensitivity in your life. In many ways, we want to see how we are ourselves perceived. And so there is a sense in which, but for Levinas, the infinite responsibility is always ours. He has this asymmetrical thing where he says, we're all responsible for each other, but I am more responsible than everybody else. Now, of course, if everybody thought like that, it would be kind of a wonderful world. But yeah, Levinas is very into, and some people critique him for this, but he's very into the idea that from my perspective, I need to encounter the subjectivity of the other, and I'm not that responsible for how people objectify me. But there's lots of that's kind of. I think there's problems with that and whatever. But what I like about what he's saying is he's saying that the responsibility starts here with us, and how we treat the other. Alicia says, thanks, Pete. As a therapist, I always appreciate your ideas. Oh, thank you. Keep me thinking, going deeper. Oh, yeah. Oh, you're just being nice. Sorry, I don't like reading out comments because it makes it look like, oh, someone said something nice about me. Everybody listen to this. But I very much appreciate it. Thank you. Let's see. Somebody's saying, I can't pronounce your name, sorry. Rhesa. Would that be Risa? Rish? I'm very bad at pronouncing names. I was in the Netherlands last week, and I was a disaster. Unbelievable. I'm afraid that sometimes to take responsibility is to interrupt somebody's absolute subjectivity, since that very subjectivity begs for help. I'm afraid that sometimes to take responsibility, which... Sorry, I got cut off there. I'm afraid that sometimes to take responsibility is to interrupt someone's absolute subjectivity, since that very subjectivity begs for help. If I hear you right, are you saying that, yeah, when you take responsibility, you are interfering with people's lives in a sense? You're getting involved in the messiness of the world, and that can go wrong? I don't know if that's what you're saying, but if that's what you're saying, I think that's part of, this absolute responsibility is when you decide to act, this is the problem, is you might mess up. And not acting, you might mess up. It's like there is no safety. That's the condemnation of freedom that's so terrifying for us, is that we might end up being the enemy, doing something terrible. Now, at that point, we have to have the courage to face up to that, to take responsibility and to say, yeah, I tried to be helpful, but you know what, I was naive. Like every 17-year-old who does a mission trip or whatever, he's like, you go in there and you got the best of intentions, and hopefully you don't mess up too much, and sometimes you mess up a lot, and ultimately you kind of take responsibility for that. And if you do a good job, you can, pat yourself in the back, buy a beer and relax for an hour, but there is no way to protect ourselves from the things that can arise from acting or not acting in the world. Okay, let me see. There's a question there I saw that looked good. Okay, are you not afraid that you can come across as patronizing when asking to be evangelized to? Yeah, I mean, you could do, like, in truth, how we ran the Evangelism Project is we would just, contact some group and say, this is a group of people, largely from the Christian community, and we would love to kind of learn a little bit about humanism or Jewish tradition or Islamic tradition, but also we're really interested in seeing, what we look like from your perspective. We as in the Christian community in Belfast, in Northern Ireland, what's been your experiences of that? And actually, in practice, I can't think of any time that it didn't work. And we did this for years and years and years, once a month. We also did the Last Supper, which is another version. We invited someone to come and talk to us who was likely coming from a different place. And if we didn't like what they said, it was their Last Supper, hence the Last Supper. But they were the seat of Christ. So we sat them symbolically in the seat of Christ, and we were there to listen. And no, it usually, my experience was it really developed close links. I remember one time after we invited this humanist guy to the Last Supper, they then asked me to do a talk at the Humanist Society, which was kind of rare for them to take an interest in anybody kind of with a religious philosophy. And then they asked me to be on a debate with them against a Christian group at the Queen's University. So it became this really weird, messy kind of mix of back and forth. But yeah, I guess that could be a danger, definitely something to watch out for. And Liz writes, how not to struggle with resentment. It's one thing to set aside the ego, recognize that I'm not really separate from the other, but it's also exhausting. Yeah, no, totally. It's exhausting. And resentment, by the way, is it's an emotion that we are always in danger of. Nietzsche wrote very, very perceptively of the power and the reach and the depth of resentment in our lives. How it comes up in the weirdest of ways. If a friend does well, we sometimes feel something in ourselves. We're not happy. And we say, oh, I'm so happy for you. You found someone you love. Oh, but somehow you resent them. Resentment is a deep thing within us. And part of the liturgy that I'm talking about, I think there's a place for us becoming sensitive to those darker emotions within ourselves and bringing them to the light of day. Not so that they control us, but precisely so that they can be let go of, and that will be the topic for tomorrow. Maybe tomorrow, maybe the day after tomorrow, who knows. How long have I been on for? I don't want to be boring you too much. I don't see the time. Let's see. I'll finish with this last question from Anderson. Isn't it wrong, though, to try and change others' faith because we think we are right? All paths have a truth. Okay, well, so that's getting on to interfaith dialogue and all that kind of stuff. For me, because Christianity isn't a worldview for me, it's not a position. It's not then a position. It's not an identity. So faith, and I've explored this elsewhere. Faith for me is a way of being in the world. It's not belief is to do with what you think about the world, but faith is a way of engaging with the world. And so that way of engaging with the world can operate anywhere. Paul Tillich calls it ultimate concern. Faith is a way of giving yourself wholly to some aspect of the world, in a way, that you will live and die for the good. And those questions don't come up within, obviously, the radical theology that I do, but that would be a whole other talk, which we should look at. I'm sure I've got stuff online about that. Okay, I will check out now, but just to remind you, these Facebook Lives are going to be about the technology of theology, which is liturgy, just like the technology of psychoanalysis is the theater of the clinic, or the technology of physics is seen in the development of quantum computers, or the technology of chemistry is seen as in the development of medicines. Philosophy itself was called a technology because it started off as a way of transforming the self. And today I just looked at this idea of this space where we are sensitized to the infinite demand of the other as a subject, and also our absolute responsibility to act without being able to, find an absolute answer to why we should do it. We have our traditions, we have philosophy, we do have lots of things that help us, but nothing that can, make us avoid responsibility for the acts or inactions of our lives. Okay, thank you very much. I will see you all very soon. Bye.